All right, first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about real property versus personal property. Again, this is a common law content that we're dealing with what's called, and this is the scientific term, Fructus Industriales versus Fructus Naturales. Okay, those are the scientific words. You may see those terminologies on the state exam, you may not. What that means, industrials and naturals, is for the industrials, we're talking about crops like wheat, corn. These are big fields, commercial farmers. Okay, and so basically, how this works, especially in Louisiana, in the mid part of the state, these farmers will lease this property out from the owner of the land, and then they'll plant their crop as a tenant. They're called tenant farmers. Okay, now it is considered personal property. Okay, don't confuse this with perennials or Fructus Naturales. I'll talk about that on the next slide. But when you see the word industrials, we're talking about personal property. We're talking about industry. We're talking about the farming industry. So, and the reason it makes them personal property is because during the gestation cycle, they grow. Yes, it would seem like it's real property because they're permanently in the ground, but because they're going to be harvested, just like you see in the picture here, that big combine is harvesting this wheat field, and this individual in this combine harvesting this wheat field may be a tenant farmer. Doesn't own the land, owns the crop. So it's considered personal property. Okay, personal property. Could be a field of corn, sugarcane, and basically it's harvested annually. And because it's picked or harvested and comes out of the ground while it's growing, listen to me, it is considered personal property. Okay. Now, don't confuse this with the term Fructus Naturales, or what's called perennials. Okay. This is landscape. This is coming up on someone's home, and you see the azaleas. You may see some white cottonwood trees with the pretty white blossoms. The grass, you can see in the backdrop here, all the big pine trees. Those are actually permanent to the land, and they're not harvested, but they're going to be there year in and year out for years to come. Okay, that is considered real property. Okay, that's considered real property. So remember, industrials. Okay, Fructus Industrials, which means we're talking about crops that are growing. Okay, crops that are growing. Implements is another term. Crops that are growing that will be harvested, which means they're coming out of the ground. That's considered personal property versus Fructus Naturales or perennials are permanent to the ground. They're going to be real property. Okay, so you want to know the difference when it comes to crops and perennials. Fructus Industrials or implements, and perennials or Fructus Naturales. Okay, personal property, real property. All right, so let's look at a couple of questions you may see on the state exam. What is another term for implements? What do you think? Another term for implements. Now remember, when we talked about implements, we're talking about those crops that were harvested is considered personal property. And we're talking about Fructus Industrials and implements. Remember, perennials, which are permanent, those are Fructus Naturales. Okay, so we're looking at answer A. Those are considered Fructus Industrials. Okay, implements go with industrials. Perennials go with naturals. Okay, very good. All right, here's another question you may see. Which of the following below best represents Fructus Naturales? What do you think? All right, couple of mixed answers here. Let's go back and review real quick. When we say Fructus Naturales, remember, we're talking about permanent. palm trees, crepe myrtles. Here in the picture, we see all the flowers in bloom, the azaleas and the shrubs, the grass, the trees in the backyard. That's all permanent, naturals, okay? Perennials. They're not harvested. When we look at crops, because they're going to be harvested, is considered personal property, industrials, or implements, okay? Implements. Now, the question is, which of the following below represent Fructus Naturales? So you have to look at this and ask yourself, you're at the test center and you're going to ask yourself, what is Fructus Naturales? Okay, those are perennials, permanent, real property. So I'm not looking for something I can harvest. I'm looking for something permanent. Now, saying that, what would be your best selection now? Very good. Excellent. Right? Cornfield, wheat field, those are harvested crops. That's not considered Fructus Naturales, but they're industrials. So those two aren't the right answer, which makes D not the right answer. And so we're looking at a rose garden, something that's permanent and it's going to be there year round. Okay? Very good. So you want to know those. Listen, it's very important that you understand the difference because it can get confusing a little bit, but always keep the industrials or implements as something that can be harvested. And then the perennials or naturals is something that's going to be permanent, like landscape. Okay? All right. Let's continue on and talk about real property versus personal property. Now, remember, real property, here's a basic definition, right? Cannot move this property. In other words, real property you can't move. For example, we talked about the Fructus Naturales or the perennials like a tree. You saw the trees in the background of that house. You can't go and move a pine tree. Okay, that can't be done. Neither can you move a house. That's considered real property. Okay. Personal property, on the other hand, can be moved. If I go into a house and there's a pool table, I can load it up on a truck. A refrigerator can unplug it and roll it out the door. Okay. It's not considered permanent to the property itself. So it's considered personal property. We're going to talk a little bit more about transferring real property versus personal property a little bit later. Now, for the state exam, listen to me carefully. You want to know these three components. It's made up of, real estate is made up of land, improvements. Okay, that word improvement is used on the state exam, but what that means is improvement of the land. Think about that. Think about it in terms of that. If I've got raw land and I want to improve the land, I'm going to put a house on it. I'm going to put a fence, maybe a barn. Okay. So hence I'm improving the land. That's why they call them improvements. Okay. So it starts out with raw land. Then you got the improvements. Okay. Now, when I take land plus real estate, or excuse me, land plus improvements, which is any improvement, and this includes ownership rights, that's what gives me the definition for real estate. Okay. So land is real property. Improvement is real property, and then the land plus the improvement, combination of both of them, with the ownership is considered real property. So I got a nice little picture here. This was actually a project I had for my client, sold him the land up at the top left, and then brokered the contractor to build the house for him. Okay, so oversaw and managed the building process. And then, of course, the end result, that's not the house, but I just found something that looked as close as possible. But my whole point of the slide is there's your raw land. Okay. Notice all the perennials that are on that land right now. Those are Fructus Naturales. Those are trees. You can't move it. That's all considered real property along with the dirt. Okay. Now, you add the improvement. There's the house. That raw land, let's say, was purchased for $100,000. And then the home was built. Now the whole real estate itself, land plus the improvement, the whole real estate may be worth $650,000. So there's another hint from an economic standpoint. The actual home improves the raw land in value and physical characteristic. Okay, so you got land, which is the raw land and all the natural components with it. Those are what we refer to as perennials or Fructus Naturales. And then you got the improvement, which is the building itself. Here it's a 2-story house. And then you take both of those and add them together. And at the bottom, you see you got real estate. Okay. So you want to dissect, separate these components as land, improvement, together it's real estate. Okay. And also that real estate is included with the bundle of rights as far as ownership goes. Okay. All right. Let's answer this question. Physical land, its attachments, and its bundle of rights is known as what? What do you think? Physical land, its attachments, that's talking about the improvements, and its bundle of rights is known as what? Remember, we said land plus the improvements equals what? Real estate. Remember, when you go back here, land plus the improvement or the attachments gives you real estate. Okay. So we're looking at answer B. Bravo. Okay. Land plus the improvements gives you real estate. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about, again, going back to talk about real property versus personal property. Now, if you look under A, personal property, you may see a term called personality, or you may see the word chattel on the state exam. Don't be confused. They all mean the same thing. Okay. Now, again, we talked about personal property that are items that can be moved in the house. Okay. What are the items that are permanent, or the items in the house that is called real property? What is another term for that? For example, you see the pool table, you see the lights hanging down over the pool table. What is that called? What's the technical word we say? See the lights, immovables, that would be considered real property. But the term we're looking for are fixtures. You want to know that term for the state exam. Fixtures is real property that can't be moved. Okay. Your appliances, built-in appliances, cabinets, the flooring, all the lighting in the house, all the electrical with the lighting, the plumbing, toilets, sinks, all that. That's all considered real property. Yes, it is. But it's defined as fixtures. Okay. They are immovable, but the correct term on the state exam is fixtures of things in the house. Okay. When we see the term immovable, we're talking about the term of the actual structure itself. Inside, we reference those as fixtures. Immovable they are, and they are considered real property, but you're going to want to know the word fixture on the state exam. So if you look at the pool table, I can load that up in a moving van. I don't have to, it's not permanently mounted. Neither is the little round coffee table right there with the chairs and the lamps, the bar stools. All that's considered movables. All that's considered personal property. Okay. Can be moved. It's not permanent. Okay. It can get a little sticky. And I want to bring this to your attention. When you get out in the real world, you got to be careful about these things, because if you're listing a property, you got to be aware of what could be misinterpreted as being a fixture or not a fixture. Okay. And so typically in the kitchen, all the built-in appliances stay. Okay. They're considered. If I got a microwave on a countertop that I can unplug, that's considered personal property. But if I got a microwave that's put into a casing that's above the oven that's in a casing, then that's going to be considered real property. It's going to be considered a fixture because it's part of the actual appliances that are installed. Okay. Washer and dryers, that can be rolled out. Those are considered personal property. Okay. Now, you want to know a term called attachment. There's two terms when it comes to fixtures: attachment and what's called severance. Let's say, for example, I move that pool table and I want to change that lighting. If I take that lighting and undo it and lay it on the floor, what happens to that fixture after it's been severed? is that considered real property or personal property while it's laying on the floor? What do you think? And you want to know this. You got to know this for the state exam. If I take that lighting down, okay, I unscrew it, disconnect the wiring, I take it out of the ceiling because I want to put a ceiling fan there or something, and I lay it on the floor, is it now personal property or does it remain real property? What do you think? All right, good. Right? So we're talking about personal property. While it's attached, that's called attachment, then it is a fixture. But if I sever it, the word severance, you'll see, that means I'm taking it down, I'm laying it on the floor. That means it's personal property. Now, if I got a ceiling fan on the floor that I'm going to replace, right, and I take the lighting down, I've got two personal properties on the floor right now with some wires hanging. Now I'm going to take the ceiling fan and install it. When I install it, that's called attachment. See, when I took the lighting down, that's called severance or to sever. But now I'm attaching the ceiling fan. I've taken personal property and I've converted it to real property. That's called a fixture. Now that it's installed, it now belongs to the property. And so I may take that lighting and box it up, put it in the garage for safe keeps or use it for something else. But you want to know attachment and severance, okay? And what state, real or personal, depending how it's mounted or if it's not mounted, you want to identify that in a test question. You also want to know that in-ground swimming pools is considered real property. Above ground swimming pools are considered personal property, okay? Pergolas, you see the pergola in the bottom picture against the house. That pergola is kind of an outdoor, it's concreted, it's in the ground. The landscape is all permanent. We talked about perennials or Fructus Naturales. So you can see the grass and the plants and the trees in the background. Now, you see the bird bath. That's personal property, right? Because that can be just loaded up and carted out. So that's personal property. You see the barbecue pit. That's personal property. Okay. You see the table with the umbrella folded down. That's personal property. The fence line, the wall on the other side of the pool, the pergola, the concrete, the in-ground pool, that's all considered real property, okay? So again, distinguishing between real property and personal property, distinguishing severance, attachment, and what state the property is in, whether it's attached or severed, you want to know that, okay? All right, so you may have a test question that says, which is not an example of an attachment? Which one is not an example? Right? Basketball hoop, those things that are on wheels, you can push it in the garage. That's considered personal property. A greenhouse that's permanent and built, that's part of a structure or an improvement. The lily pond, just like an in-ground pool, that's considered part of the land. Uncut rose bushes, again, not considered personal property. So they're all considered part of an attachment, right? The one that doesn't reflect that is a basketball hoop, right? This can be rolled into the garage. That's personal property. Very good. All right. All right. Let's continue on. This is a very, very important section that I'm getting ready to go over. So pay attention very, very closely. Continuing on with fixtures, we kind of we laid some basic foundation when it comes to fixtures, when it comes to attachment, severance, real property, and personal property. I think you guys got the vision. But this section right here, when it comes to fixtures, can be very troublesome to try to figure out on the state exam. Okay. Remember, we define fixture as real property. Okay. It's attached to the home. it's permanent. Okay. If it's not attached to the home, it's considered personal property. We just covered that in the last slide. So we identify a fixture as permanent to the home. Okay. Now, the legal test that the court systems in common law, again, we're talking about common law. Over the years, there have been so many discussions in legal battles over what's a fixture, what's not a fixture. Oh, the homeowner took this with him. It should have stayed with the house. And so on. And just scores and scores of legal battles over this. So the courts came up with a legal test that you want to kind of know for the state exam, and also kind of keep this in your little playbook when you're dealing with clients. Okay. Now, anytime you get the parties to agree, that's perfect. That's what you want, right? If there's any confusion, listen to me carefully, on if it's a fixture or not, as long as the parties agree, you got it in writing, we're good to go. Okay, so that's an easy one. Now, the relationship between the parties, or the relationship of the parties. For example, if I'm renting a property that you own and I go in and install a fixture, okay, what's my relationship is going to be, I'm a tenant, right? I'm a tenant. Typically, if I install something that's permanent and it's going to be a fixture, I myself am going to obviously get permission. But and then the other thing is, I'm going to absolutely make an agreement that I can take it with me. Okay, so what's my relationship with the parties? Okay, the other one is the intention of the party placing the item. Now, I've got a couple examples on this one, on number 3. If you look at the top 2 pictures, you look at the far right one, you can see that all I would have to do is unplug it, lift up the window a little bit, take those accordions, fold them in, and pull the air conditioner in, put it in the box, and shut the window, right? May take maybe 30 seconds, okay? What is my intention is not to make it permanent. So in this case, that window unit to the far right would be personal property, okay? Again, if you're touring property and you see a window unit and it looks like this, you want to make sure there's an agreement between the parties whether it stays or goes. But for the state exam, what's the intention of the party? If you look at a picture like that, you're going to say, that's not a permanent installment. I can take that down, close the window, and I can pack it up and put it in the back of a truck in a matter of minutes. Okay. So we're not saying permanent there. So that's going to be personal property. However, if on the left air conditioner unit, I'm going to take out the window, you can see there's no window, and I'm putting some type of external siding with a cutaway that an AC unit's going to fit into, mounted on a bracket that's bolted into the concrete. What's my intention there? My intention there is to make it permanent. So under the law, under the courts, they would say this is considered a fixture. Okay. So when we talk about what's the intention of the party placing the items, that's what we're looking at. Is there intention? And you know what's so interesting about it is I don't need to hear from a defendant. I don't need to hear from whoever's getting sued or what. If I've got a seller that's putting, and I'm looking at this picture and I got to make a judgment on that, on the left top picture, I'm going to say it's a fixture. Okay, so we have to compensate the buyer either with a new air conditioner or go back and put the one you took out in. If I'm looking at the one on the right and I see that, and then I see another picture with the window closed, there's no case there. Okay, the window does not belong to you, Mr. New Buyer. Okay, so intention of the party. So you want to read the question, pay special care about how you read it, and know what their intention is. The last one is the method of attachment. So what is my intention really will determine my method. Okay. Now, a couple of examples when we talk about actual annexation. Annexation means to adopt to, right? You're bringing it on board. So if you look at the bottom left, this is more popular than anything. Surround around systems, flat screen TVs mounted on brackets that are mounted to a wall. Okay, these are very popular. 9 times out of 10, when you show a property, you're going to probably see a minimum of 3 or 4 of these TVs mounted to the wall throughout the house. And what you want to know about this is if you look at the speakers, you see how the speakers are mounted to the brick walls? They're wired, by the way, to the brick wall. They're wired to the brick wall. They're permanent. That's considered a fixture. But what about the the receiver on the actual shelving there below the TV? That goes with the speakers, right? Well, I can unplug those and put them in a box in a matter of 5-10 seconds. Is that personal property? And the answer is no. What they mean by actual annexation is it's actually going to be a fixture because it belongs to the speakers that are permanently mounted. It comes as a unit, okay? Same thing with the TV. Same thing with the brackets. The TV, I pull the pin, I can slide it off, unplug it, undo the cable, and now most of the time you got these apps on these TVs now that you don't even need cable anymore. So the point is the bracket is the only thing that's mounted permanently to the wall. That's permanent. That's the fixture. The TV slides off like the air conditioning unit does and closes the windows. So that's considered personal property. Again, when you get into the real world, you want to make sure your agreement between the parties. Okay, that's very, very important that you understand, not only for the state exam, but when you get in real life. You're really going to need to pay attention to this because it can get ugly quick. The last one under 4B is constructive annexation. If you look at the bottom right picture, you see I got a set of keys in the door. Okay, there's a set of keys in the door. Now, if I'm sitting at the closing table and we sign paperwork and this is my house and I just sold it to you, I'm going to give you the keys. Are those keys considered fixtures or personal property? Well, John, they're personal property. Come on, they're keys. No, because they belong to the front door. They are constructively annexed to the front door. It is a fixture I'm giving you. Okay. Same thing with the garage door opener. Okay. All it is an electronic box, but it belongs to the unit that's permanently mounted. So constructively, it's annexed. It belongs to that. That box, electric control, and the keys are considered fixtures. Okay. So you really want to have a good opportunity to really digest this, rest your eyes on this, and really understand these legal tests. Okay. All right, here we go. Question 1. J buys a house from K. J assumed that the curtains would be included in the price. Even though the agreement of the sale did not list them, what is the best argument J could make to persuade a judge if this goes to court? Here's the key words you're looking for. Assume that the curtains would be included in the price. Okay. So you have to keep that in mind. What do you think? If you thought curtains would be included in the price, how would you present that to a judge? What do you think? Okay, got a couple of mixed answers. So remember we talked about annexation or method of attachment. Remember when we speak of method of attachment, we were talking about the receivers below the TV. They belong, right? They belong to the speakers because the speakers are permanently mounted. In this case, and this is really a really hard question, kind of a trick question. But if Jay assumed the curtains would be included in the price, it's because Jay thought the curtains were custom made for that odd shaped window. In other words, if they took the curtains with them, where else would they fit? In other words, they were made to fit that window. Okay. Again, method of attachment. not method of attachment, but we're talking about, method of attachment. We're talking about actual annexation. In other words, it fits that purpose in that, because you're talking about a window that's built specifically at an odd shape. And those curtains were designed just for that window. So that would be the argument. We're talking about answer C. Okay. Again, for test purposes, you want to be familiar with these, but in real life, you really want to bring this up in open discussion and get it in writing. Okay. All right. Next question is, what term describes a property that transfers with ownership of a house? What term describes a property that transfers with the ownership of a house? What do you think? Okay. Perfect. There you go. We're talking about property. Could it be personal or is it real property? And what we understand it is the property that goes with the ownership of the house is going to be fixtures. Okay. So we're talking about answer D. Now, the third question I wanted to ask about fixtures is, which item is least likely to be a fixture? Okay. So you got to go through here and ask yourself, which item in here is least likely to be a fixture? Go ahead. Which item is least likely to be a fixture? All right. Now, this is, I like this question because you got to stop and you got to really role play. Okay. And this is kind of what I'm telling you about test question analysis. Remember, let's review about fixtures. We talked about the word severance and attachment. Okay. Severance and attachment. All right. When we talk about a severance and attachment, what are we talking about? When we attach, we make it personal to real property. If we sever it, we take it from real property, which is a fixture, and we make it personal property. Okay. So it was a fixture at one time, but because we've severed it, it's no longer a fixture. It's personal property. So you have to go through here and you've got to say what is least likely to be a fixture. Okay. So the first answer I'm looking at is, and here's where they're going to trick you, a built-in washer. Many people will stop there and say, that's a fixture. And they press on and they go to a curio cabinet in the living room. And then they go keys to the house and then the white picket fence. Okay. But they won't read the full answer of A. Okay. Answer A. The built-in washer that's at the repair shop at the day of closing. Okay. So you got a built-in washer. Okay. That's at the built-in's the key word. That's at the repair shop now. So attached, built-in fixture, severanced, take it out, at the repair shop, personal property, not a fixture. Okay. So we're talking about answer A. And let me emphasize this to you. This is very important. Pay attention to me carefully. I've been doing this a long time. These test writers do this purposely because they know the human side of us. We're quick readers, and when we see a certain verbiage, we're going to roll with it. We won't even finish the question. We won't even finish the answer. For example, again, if I'm reading this and I've got a real quick speed about myself, I'm going to go built-in washer. Boom. I stop there and I go, that's a fixture. That's not the answer. And then I try to look out of B, C, and D, what's going to best fit that? And curio cabinet kind of may fit into that if you understand that keys belong to the house and the white picket fence. But you got to finish. Built-in washer that's at the repair shop means it's not a fixture anymore. It's been severed and it's personal property, not a fixture. Does that make sense? Does everybody see what I'm talking about? And these questions are important. And the reason we have these type questions in here is to try to condition you. We're in the weight room. I want you to get in shape. I want you to condition yourself to absolutely develop a system where you're reading these questions consistently, you're analyzing, and you're looking for keywords, both in the question and the answers. For example, in the answer of A, if you stopped at built-in washer, you're going to say it's a fixture and move on. But if you read it and you're going, wait a minute. Yes, it's a built-in washer. Yes, it's a fixture, but we've severed it and it's at the repair shop. It's not a fixture anymore. So it's put back. Attachment. It's been severed. So that's not a fixture. So we're looking for answer A. Okay. So develop a system in how you're going to read these questions. All right. I got this slide here. We're kind of swinging back a little bit. Not really going to go into a big review. But here's what I want to talk about when it comes to real property versus personal property. Okay. How is it transferred in a real estate sale? Okay. Say, for example, you own this farmland. Okay. And that is your combine. Okay. And you've hired someone to come in and harvest your wheat for you. You own the land. And you've hired someone to come in and do that. Now, you're going to sell that farmland to me, and you're going to move to New York City. Okay. No reason for you to bring that combine to Manhattan. All right. No reason for that. So you want to sell that with the property. In its state right now, that is considered personal property. Okay. It is considered personal property. It's not permanent. It's like a car. It's like a motorcycle. It's like a pool table. You own it, and there's no other use except for the land, but it's considered personal property. So how is that transferred when you sell the farmland to me? When you transfer real property, which is the land, the improvement, that plus improvement, real estate, all the fixtures appropriated, all the real property appropriated, is transferred and financed, appropriated, financed, and is transferred with a deed, right? That's how you transfer. Convey is another term. Convey the property through a deed, okay? But now you got this combine you want to transfer, right? In this finance sale, how's that going to be transferred? It's called a bill of sale. That is the term you're looking for on the state exam, okay? This is how personal property is transferred, is through a bill of sale, okay? A lender may or may not finance this combine and the transfer of that farmland. If it's not financed by the lender and they're only going to finance what the improvement is or the real estate, then you may have to get another loan from another bank. But nevertheless, when you buy this combine at the closing, you'll get deeded a property and you're going to get a bill of sale, okay? And they'll receive their money, okay? So any personal property that's transferred is transferred through a bill of sale. Any property that's transferred that's real property is transferred through the deed, okay? So the question says, B bought a farm and the sale included 2 tractors. What is required at the settlement to transfer ownership of those tractors? What do you think? Okay. Good. Excellent. All right. Bill of sale. Everybody's clear on that. All right.
For more practice questions, videos, and insight into the state exam, we encourage you to join our free webinar, How to Pass the Real Estate Exam Without Your Real Estate Book and with only 15 to 20 hours of study time. Get registered now at myrealestatetutor.com/exam.